I just came across this over on Facebook, because Facebook is where us old people hang out on social media. It was obviously on a left leaning, as in, I guess, horizontal leaning, so far left. Um, well, I guess for the mirrored camera, I would have to do this for left for you, wouldn't I? Because my mirror is reversed. My camera, rather, is reversed. At any rate, it was on a left-leaning media's Facebook page. Is this what you voted for? See, that's to get the attention of conservatives like myself, because it's obviously a man with earrings and dressed like a woman. Is this what you voted for? To mislead you into thinking that the meme is about voting in favor of it. Is this what you voted for? President Trump's DOD, his DOD, Department of Defense, just rolled out a new policy ordering military leaders to identify transgender service members or anyone diagnosed with gender dysphoria and force them into medical evaluations that could end in discharge from the U.S. military. They're literally preparing to purge the ranks. Because transgender people are people too, right? And if you're a people, then you should be allowed to serve in the military. Keep in mind now, and I harped and harped and harped and harped and harped on this. I mean, decades ago, before social media was even a thing, before it even existed, I harped on the fact that most every major social shift in the nation began in the U.S. military. If it didn't begin there, then it picked up the steam there. It became effective and powerful and stronger there. This even goes for things that were positive developments like integration. The U.S. military was integrated long before the U.S. Society was. Things like that. Feminism, women's rights, all of those sorts of things began with the U.S. military, and then the U.S. military was used as an example of why whatever that shift may be needed to be the case out in the society at large. Here's how it goes. Well, if black people are good enough to serve alongside white people in the military, then they're good enough to live alongside of them, work alongside of them, blah, 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 blah. Now, don't come at me about the race issue. I am not saying that integration is a bad thing. I don't even have a problem with it. I'm just telling you what the process was, you see. Well, if women are good enough to serve the U.S. military in these professional or whatever roles, then they're good enough, dot, 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 you see. And then it went to the gays. Well, if the homosexual men can serve and then transgender men, transgender people rather, and that's the way it is. It's the way the progressives work to use the U.S. military, which means taxpayer money, which uses the U.S. military to establish the normalcy. I don't even like that word. Coined by who? I think it was Hoover, I think. Anyway, I got that wrong. It was coined by the U.S. president that was in office after World War I. Anyway, so it creates a sense of normalcy for whatever the situation is, the controversial situation, and then uses that as an example to say, well, it goes on in the military, so it ought to go on here. This is similar to how these same people will make the argument that something that is the case in, quote unquote, the developed world. Or sometimes they'll say European nations or Western nations. Since the Western nations do it, then that means the U.S. should do it, of course, ignoring the fact that when those Western nations get their collective or individual asses in a crack and need to be rescued from non-Western nations who don't do those things, who do they call? They call the American redneck. That's who they call. So that's what this meme is speaking out against. It's saying, hey, Donald Trump has done this horribly oppressive thing by saying that anyone who's been diagnosed with gender dysphoria or identify as transgender, even if they haven't been diagnosed, if they identify as transgender, then they need to go to medical evaluations and possibly be discharged from the U.S. military, because this is a horrible, 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 oppressive tragedy against people with gender dysphoria. My cousin, her ex-husband, was discharged from the U.S. Navy back in the early 90s. I believe it was early 90s. May have been, early 90s. May have been the late 80s. But anyway, early 90s, I'll say. He was discharged from the U.S. Navy because he was obese. They went through a process of trying to get him fit, trying to get him in better athletic shape. He continued being fat and fat and fat. See, they didn't care about fat shaming back then. They still don't care about fat shaming today if you're a man. Just lucky for me, I don't give a damn, right? When I married my wife, I was 185 pounds. People made fun of me because I was 6'3" and so skinny. And now I am 320 something. Depends on what time of the day you want to weigh me. And people make fun of me sometimes because I'm fat. So I've been on both sides of the fence, and I didn't care either time. But, fat shaming is only bad when they're fat shaming a man. But they fat shamed my cousin's ex-wife right on out of the U.S. military. They'll kick you out of the military for all sorts of things. Skin conditions, developed mental disorders, which is what gender dysphoria over here is. If instead of gender dysphoria, it was manic depression. You remember when that was the thing? They began calling that, I believe, bipolar. They'll kick you out of the military for things like developing schizophrenia, paranoia issues, all sorts of things. They'll kick you out of the military sometimes for something as simple as alcoholism. I know that sounds crazy, but when my mother met my stepfather, he was an enlisted man in the U.S. military stationed on the USS Forrest Sherman, DD 931. That's since been commissioned and scrapped. When she met him, he was 30 days post-divorce from his first wife. And he was a sailor, and he was a Catholic sailor. And so he was also a pretty doggone heavy drinker. And the story is that when my mother met him, that he was in the beginning stages of being sent to captain's mast, M-A-S-T, not to be conferred with Catholic Mass, but M-A-S-S, but to captain's mast, which is like being called in for a very high-level HR meeting with the owner of the company, or at least the vice president or the chief operational officer or whatever, but just being called in and quite possibly getting sent to rehab. And that didn't happen. The captain's mast was, the story goes, delayed by a friend. And then, Dave and my mother became involved, and he stopped drinking so much. Usually you meet a woman and she'll drive you to drinking. She actually drove him to a more sober life. At any rate, that's captain's mast. Had he gone through captain's mast, he could have eventually been court-martialed and driven out of the Navy for drinking too much. Now, you're drinking a lot when you're drinking so much that the Navy don't want you. Right. But alcoholism, that's an emotional disorder, mental disorder, some say. And so you get driven out of the Navy for that. You can get rejected for the military by having flat feet. That was an issue I believe Jimmy Carter had, although he was in the Navy. But you could get driven out of the military for having flat feet, all sorts of things like that. Medical deficiencies can get you kicked out of the military or refuse service in the military. There's a test to enlist in the military, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. known commonly as the ASVAB. I took it several times when I was in high school. Why did I take it when I was in high school? Because you could get out of class and go down there and take the ASVAB. And just for the record, they have the little number line thing where it's like the little margin of error. And the middle of the margin of error, a little shaded area, shows, where your score was at, your percentage. But then it gives the number line for the margin of error. Just so you know, I was in the 99 percentile, folks. Sure was. You know why? I am a pretty fart smeller. I really am. Yeah, my little number line was, you see like this, if this whole box was a score sheet, my little number line was like this. See, like there was just a little bit of it left over here around the 97, 98 percentile. So, yep, Big Daddy was off the charts on the ASVAB. I almost went into the military, too. I was planning on going into the Navy. And then after the ASVAB test, the recruiters started blowing my phone up and offering me ROTC scholarships to go off to college. And then I would have been able to get out of college and enter the Navy as an ensign and go on further from that. And then I started thinking, hey, because I didn't think of myself as a college-bound student in high school. I was a vocational student. That's another long story. So, hey, I can just go through college on my own, and then if I still want to enlist after that, then I can still enlist and go do what I planned on doing all through high school. And so that would have been May of 1989, and then August of 1989, I met Miss Deidre, and she was 4 foot 11 inches of holy crap. And so the rest is history. Yep, I asked her out. She turned me down. I stayed on top of that situation. No pun intended. She eventually went out with me, and then before I knew it, I was 54 years old with 5 children. So that's how it happened. But my plan was to go into the military to begin with. But my point is, you have to take that ASVAB. And if you don't score enough on that ASVAB because you are mentally deficient, you don't go in the military. This is not discrimination. This is not oppression. This is not mistreatment in any way. The military has a standard. It also has a job. The military's job is to protect democracy. It is not to practice democracy. And that's a very important difference, folks. You see, the U.S.'s military is to protect this dude's right to dress the way he's dressed right there and to call himself what he calls himself. That's their job, is to protect his right to do that. Their job is not to employ him or to bring that practice into the U.S. military. That's just the way it is. And I'm Dane.